She could not breathe. Brielle Lawson opened her eyes to darkness, to the hum of an engine, to the faint scent of leather and cologne that did not belong to anyone she knew. Her body was pressed against a cold car seat. The seatbelt was not buckled. The door beside her was locked. The car was moving. Her fingers scrambled for the handle. She pulled once, twice, but nothing gave. Her heart slammed against her ribs so hard it hurt. Through the tinted window, streetlights slid past in long golden streaks, and nothing outside looked familiar. Not the road. Not the buildings. Not the silence. Then she turned her head and saw him. A man sat on the other end of the back seat. White, tall, dark brown hair that was slightly pushed back, blue eyes that caught the passing light. He wore a navy blue suit with the top button of his white shirt undone, and he was watching her. Not with aggression. Not with amusement. But with something careful, something patient, as if he had been waiting for her to wake up. Brielle pressed herself against the door. Her mouth was dry. Her voice came out cracked and barely audible. "Who are you? Where am I?" The man raised both hands slowly, palms open, like a person trying not to startle a frightened animal. "You're safe," he said. His voice was calm. "Oh, you got into my car about 20 minutes ago. You were asleep before the door closed." Brielle's thoughts stumbled over each other. 20 minutes. Sleep. Her eyes darted to the driver's seat, where a broad-shouldered man in a gray suit kept his eyes on the road. The partition between the front and back seats was half open. "Pull over," Brielle said louder now. "Please pull over." The man in the blue suit leaned forward without hesitation. "James, pull over at the next block." The car slowed. Brielle's fingers were shaking. She tried to think, tried to rewind the night, tried to remember anything past the last hour of her shift. But her brain was fogged, heavy with the kind of exhaustion that erased memory in chunks. She had just finished a 16-hour double shift at Mercy Ridge Hospital. 2 codes, a cardiac arrest that did not end well, and a hallway full of patients waiting for beds that did not exist. She had clocked out at 2:14 a.m., walked through the parking garage on legs that felt like they were filled with sand, and climbed into the first black sedan she saw. She had thought it was her rideshare. It was not. The car stopped along a quiet, well-lit street. The driver stepped out and opened her door from the outside. Cool night air rushed in, and Brielle almost fell out of the car trying to stand. "Easy," the man in the blue suit said, stepping out from the other side. He came around to her but kept his distance. "You look like you have not slept in days." "I have not," Brielle said, and she hated how her voice trembled. She straightened her green jacket over her blue scrubs and looked around. She was only about 6 blocks from the hospital. The neighborhood was familiar now. A 24-hour pharmacy glowed on the corner. A bus stop bench sat empty under a streetlight. She turned back to the man. He stood with his hands in his pockets, and he did not look impatient or annoyed. He looked concerned. "I am sorry," Brielle said. "I thought your car was my ride. I did not mean to." "You do not need to apologize," he said. "You were exhausted. You made an honest mistake." He paused. "Can I give you a ride home? It is almost 3 in the morning, and you should not be standing on this sidewalk alone." Every instinct told her to say no, to call another car, to handle it herself the way she handled everything. But her phone was at 4%, her legs were aching, and his eyes were steady. Not predatory. Not calculating. Just kind. "Okay," she said quietly. "Thank you." She got back in the car. He told James her address after she gave it, and they pulled away from the curb. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that happens between 2 people who are both too tired for pretense. "I am Ethan," he said after a while. "Brielle. You are a nurse?" She looked down at her scrubs, stained with coffee and something she did not want to identify. "Yeah. At Mercy Ridge. Double shift. 16 hours. She leaned her head against the window. "We are short-staffed." Again. Ethan nodded slowly. He did not offer empty words about how things would get better or how she should take care of herself. He just listened. "My sister is in her last year of college," Brielle said, not sure why she was telling a stranger this. Maybe it was the hour. Maybe it was the exhaustion stripping away every wall she had carefully built. "I promised her she would graduate without debt. So I pick up every extra shift I can." "That is a big promise," Ethan said. "She is worth it." The car pulled up in front of a modest brick apartment building. The porch light was on. Brielle reached for the door then stopped. "Thank you," she said. "For not making this weird. For just being kind." Ethan smiled. It was a small smile, barely there, but it was real. Get some sleep, Brielle. She walked to her front door, keys already in her hand, and did not look back. She climbed the stairs to her second-floor apartment, locked the door behind her, kicked off her shoes, and collapsed onto her bed still wearing her scrubs. She was asleep in under a minute. The next morning, she woke up at noon to 17 missed calls from Tanya, her best friend and fellow nurse, and a news notification on her phone. She tapped it open and her stomach dropped. The headline showed a photo of a man in a navy blue suit standing outside a gleaming corporate tower. The same calm face. The same blue eyes. Callaway Health Industries CEO Ethan Callaway announces largest quarterly earnings in company history. Brielle sat on the edge of her bed and stared at her phone. She had fallen asleep in the car of one of the richest men in the country. And he had simply driven her home. If you were alone, exhausted, and realized you had just been in a billionaire's car, what would you do? Would you ever expect someone with that kind of wealth to just be kind? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you want to find out what happens when Ethan shows up at her hospital 2 days later, subscribe now because this story is far from over. For 2 days, Brielle tried to forget about it. She went back to work. She changed 4 bags, charted vitals, held the hand of an elderly woman who had no family to visit her, and helped a teenager with a broken arm stop crying long enough to let the doctor set it. She did what she always did. She kept moving. But Tanya would not let it go. You fell asleep in a billionaire's car, Tanya said for the 5th time during their lunch break in the cafeteria. She sat across from Brielle in her maroon scrubs, stabbing a fork into a sad-looking salad. Brielle. A billionaire. I did not know he was a billionaire when I got in the car. I thought it was my Uber. And he just drove you home? Yes. No phone number? No business card? No call me? Brielle shook her head. He was polite. That is it. It is not a story, Tanya. It is an embarrassing mistake. Tanya leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. It is absolutely a story. You just do not see it yet. Brielle finished her soup and went back to work. She had a patient in room 4 who needed a catheter changed, and another in room 12 whose blood pressure had been climbing all morning. The hospital was its usual controlled chaos, and there was no room in that chaos for daydreams about blue-eyed men in expensive cars. Then, at 3:47 p.m., her charge nurse told her she had a visitor at the front desk. Brielle walked down the hallway, tugging her blue scrub top straight, expecting a patient's family member with questions or maybe a delivery she had forgotten about. Instead, she found Ethan Callaway standing in the lobby of Mercy Ridge Hospital holding a small paper bag and her hospital ID badge. He wore the same kind of navy blue suit, though this one was slightly different in cut. His white shirt was buttoned higher today. He looked entirely out of place among the scuffed linoleum and fluorescent lights, like someone had cut him out of a magazine and pasted him into the wrong photo. You left this in my car, he said, holding out the badge. Brielle took it. Her fingers brushed his for half a second. You could have mailed it. I could have. But I also wanted to make sure you were all right. He lifted the paper bag. And I brought you lunch. The food here looked questionable the last time I visited a hospital. She almost refused. The reflex was automatic, the same reflex that made her say, I am fine, when she was falling apart, and I do not need help, when she desperately did. But she stopped herself. He had driven out of his way. He had brought her badge back in person. He had remembered. Thank you, she said and meant it. They sat in the hospital cafeteria, which was mostly empty in the mid-afternoon lull. The paper bag held 2 turkey sandwiches on fresh bread, 2 bottles of water, and 2 chocolate chip cookies. Brielle ate like she had not had a real meal in days, which, if she was being honest, she had not. How long have you been a nurse? Ethan asked. 6 years. Since I was 22. Went straight from school to the floor. Do you like it? Brielle considered this. I love the work. I love being with patients, being the person in the room who stays calm when everything is falling apart. But the hours, the pay, the way the system treats nurses like we are disposable. That part wears on you. Ethan listened with the same quiet attention he had shown in the car. He did not look at his phone. He did not glance at his watch. He was simply present. You mentioned your sister, he said. Amber? You remember her name? You said it with a lot of love. That tends to stick. Brielle felt something shift in her chest, a loosening she had not expected. Amber is 21. She is a senior at Langford University studying biology. She wants to go to medical school. That is expensive. Everything is expensive. Brielle set down her sandwich. Our father passed away 3 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. By the end, the medical bills were staggering. I have been paying them down bit by bit, and I cover Amber's tuition on top of that. She has a partial scholarship, but the rest comes from my shifts." Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Your father must have been a good man to raise someone like you." Brielle blinked against the sting in her eyes. "He was. He ran a tutoring center in our neighborhood for free. Every Saturday morning. Kids would line up around the block. He believed that if you could help someone, you should. No questions. No conditions. He sounds like someone I would have liked." "He would have liked you too." Brielle paused, surprised she had said that. She barely knew this man. But something about the way he carried his kindness, without fanfare, without expectation, reminded her of Raymond Lawson. Ethan leaned forward slightly. "Brielle, I want to tell you something, and I want you to hear it without any pressure." He took a breath. "I built my company because of what happened to my father. He had a heart condition when I was 19. We had insurance, but it covered almost nothing. The bills nearly destroyed my family. My mother worked 3 jobs. I dropped out of college to work. Eventually, I started a small medical supply company out of a garage, and it grew into what it is today." Brielle stared at him. "You dropped out of college?" "Second year. I went back eventually and finished, but those years were hard. That is why I understand even a little what you are carrying." He reached into his jacket pocket and took out a folded piece of paper. "Your father's medical bills. I know the hospital they are with. I made a call this morning." Brielle's hands went cold. "What kind of call?" "They are paid. All of them. The entire balance." The cafeteria was quiet. A vending machine hummed in the corner. Somewhere down the hall, a phone was ringing. Brielle opened her mouth, closed it, and opened it again. Her eyes filled. She pressed both hands flat on the table to steady herself. "You did not have to do that," she whispered. "I know. That was almost $40,000. "I know." She looked at him, really looked at him, past the suit and the company and the headlines. She saw a man who understood what it felt like to watch someone you love drown in bills they did not deserve. A man who had the power to ease that pain and chose to use it. "Thank you," Brielle said. The words came out thick and unsteady, but they were the truest thing she had said in months. "Thank you, Ethan." He nodded once and his eyes were bright. "You are welcome." They sat together until Brielle's break ended. When she stood to go, he stood too. "Can I see you again?" he asked. Not smooth. Not rehearsed. Honest. "Yes," she said. "I would like that." She walked back to her station, and for the first time in a very long time, the weight on her shoulders felt a little lighter. A week passed. Then 2. Brielle expected the whole thing to fade, the way unusual things do, becoming a story she would tell at dinner parties years from now. The time she fell asleep in a billionaire's car. The time a stranger paid off her father's medical bills. It would become an anecdote, polished and distant, no longer connected to the raw feeling of that cafeteria table and the paper he slid across it. But Ethan did not fade. He texted her the morning after their cafeteria lunch. Not anything elaborate. Just, "I hope your shift goes well today." She responded with a thank you, and the conversation continued from there, growing slowly and steadily like a vine climbing a wall, one small exchange at a time. He asked about her patients without asking for details she could not share. She asked about his work without pretending to understand the financial complexities of running a healthcare conglomerate. They talked about food, about music, about the fact that they both preferred rain over sunshine and neither of them could cook anything more complicated than scrambled eggs. On a Tuesday evening he called. "I have something I want to talk to you about," he said. "Can we meet?" Brielle was on her couch in sweatpants and a green t-shirt, eating cereal for dinner. "Is everything okay?" "More than okay. Can you do Thursday?" "There is a restaurant I like near the waterfront. I have a shift until 7. I will pick you up at 7:30. She almost said she could drive herself. She almost said he did not need to go out of his way. But she stopped. She was learning, slowly, to let someone show up for her. "Okay," she said. 7:30. Thursday arrived, and so did Ethan's car, right on time. James, the driver, opened the door for her. She slid in and found Ethan already there, wearing a blue suit that was somehow different from every other blue suit she had seen him in, though she could not explain how. The restaurant was not what she expected. It was not a grand, chandelier-draped place with a 6-month waitlist. It was a small Italian spot with checkered tablecloths, candles and wine bottles, and a waiter who called Ethan by name. "This is my favorite place in the city," Ethan said as they sat down. "My father used to bring me here when I was a kid." "Your father?" "He is still alive. Healthy now, thankfully. He had a pacemaker put in 12 years ago and it changed everything. He plays golf twice a week and eats more pasta than any cardiologist would approve of. Brielle laughed. It was a real laugh, the kind that came from somewhere deep. They ordered. Brielle got the linguine, Ethan got the rigatoni, and they shared a basket of garlic bread that disappeared in minutes. Then Ethan set his fork down and looked at her with that same steady calm he always carried. I want to tell you about something my company is doing, he said. We have established a nursing scholarship at Mercy Ridge Hospital. It is fully funded, covers student loans for working nurses, and it is renewable annually. Brielle felt the garlic bread turn heavy in her stomach. That is incredible. There is more. You are the first recipient, Brielle. The committee reviewed applications and yours was selected unanimously. She stared at him. I did not apply for anything. Dr. Fleming nominated you. Your supervisor submitted a recommendation. The selection was independent. I was not on the committee. Brielle sat very still. Her student loans were $67,000. She had been paying the minimum every month, watching the interest grow, feeling the number like a stone on her chest. Ethan. It covers everything. The full balance. She pressed her napkin to her mouth. Her eyes burned and she did not try to stop the tears this time. They fell silently, running down her cheeks, and she did not wipe them away. And there is one more thing, Ethan said gently. I have arranged for Amber's remaining tuition to be covered. Her final year, including books, housing, and fees. All of it. Brielle could not speak. She lowered her head and her shoulders shook. The waiter appeared, saw what was happening, and quietly retreated. Ethan did not rush her. He did not tell her it was nothing. He sat across from her and let her feel whatever she needed to feel. When she finally looked up, her eyes were red but clear. I do not know what to say. You do not have to say anything. No, she said firmly. I do. Because my whole life I have been the one holding everything together. I have been the one who pays the bills and works the shifts and makes the promises. And no one has ever just helped. Not like this. She reached across the table and took his hand. His fingers were warm. Thank you, she said. For my father's bills. For my loans. For Amber. Thank you for all of it. I accept every bit of it, and I am grateful in a way I do not have words for. Ethan squeezed her hand. You carry a lot, Brielle. You do not have to carry it alone. They finished dinner slowly, talking about Amber's plans for medical school, about Ethan's mother, who apparently made the best lemon cake on the eastern seaboard, and about the tiny things that make life bearable when everything feels heavy, like good bread, like a song at the right moment, like a stranger who turns out to not be a stranger at all. When James dropped her off that night, Brielle stood on her front steps and watched the car pull away. The air was cool. The sky was clear. She called Amber. Hey, what is wrong? Amber answered immediately, the way she always did, because a late-night call from Brielle usually meant a crisis. Nothing is wrong, Brielle said, and her voice was steady now. Something is very right. I need to tell you something. She told her everything. About the car, about Ethan, about the bills and the scholarship and the tuition. Amber was silent for a long time, and then she started to cry, and then she started to laugh, and then she said, Brielle, are you serious? I am serious. And you said yes to all of it? I said yes to all of it. Amber exhaled like she had been holding her breath for 3 years. Dad would be so happy. Brielle closed her eyes. Yeah, he would. The weeks that followed felt like stepping into a life that Brielle had seen through a window but never believed she could enter. With the medical bills gone and her loans erased, the constant pressure that had lived in her chest for years began to dissolve. She still worked at Mercy Ridge, still pulled her shifts, still cared for her patients with every ounce of attention she had. But for the first time she was not doing it from a place of desperation. She was doing it because she chose to. She slept through the night. She had not realized how long it had been since she had done that. Ethan called every day. Sometimes it was a 2-minute conversation between meetings. Sometimes it was an hour-long talk that wandered from topic to topic the way only comfortable conversations do. They learned each other's rhythms. He was an early riser. She was a night owl. He drank his coffee black. She added enough cream and sugar to make him wince. 3 weeks after their dinner, he asked her a question she had not expected. I am hosting a charity gala next Saturday, he said. They were on the phone, Brielle lying on her couch, Ethan apparently in his office based on the faint sound of typing he tried to muffle. It is for Callaway Health Industries. We raise money for pediatric care programs every year. That sounds wonderful. Would you come? As my guest. Brielle sat up. To a charity gala? Yes. With billionaires and politicians and people who wear clothes that cost more than my rent? With me, Ethan said simply. I would like you to be there. Brielle looked down at her green t-shirt and worn joggers. Ethan, I do not have anything to wear to something like that. And I do not mean that as a figure of speech. I literally own nothing that would be appropriate. I thought you might say that. She could hear the smile in his voice. If I sent something to you, would you accept it? There was again the reflex to decline, to insist she could figure it out herself, to refuse anything that felt like charity. But Brielle was learning something about Ethan Calloway. He did not give things to feel powerful. He gave things because giving was how he showed care. Refusing that was not strength. It was stubbornness. Yes, she said. I would accept it. 2 days later, a delivery arrived at her apartment. Tanya happened to be there, which meant there was an audience. The box was white, large, and tied with a blue ribbon. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a dress. It was red, deep and rich, with a fitted bodice, a sweeping skirt that fell just below the knee, and delicate cap sleeves. It was elegant without being flashy, beautiful without being excessive. Beneath it were shoes, silver heels that matched a small clutch purse, and a pair of simple diamond stud earrings. There was a handwritten note tucked inside the box. You already belong in every room. This is just the wrapping. Tanya read the note over Brielle's shoulder and made a sound that was somewhere between a gasp and a squeal. Brielle Lawson, if you do not marry this man, I will. Calm down. I will not calm down. Look at this dress. Feel this fabric. This is not department store. This is custom. Brielle held the dress up against herself and looked in the mirror by the door. The red was striking against her dark skin. The cut was perfect. He has good taste, Tanya said. Or he has someone with good taste. Either way, this is a sign. It is a dress, Tanya. It is a love letter in fabric form. Go to the gala. Wear the dress. Let the man treat you right. Saturday arrived and Brielle spent 2 hours getting ready. She did her own hair, pulling it into an elegant updo with soft curls framing her face. She applied her makeup carefully, dark liner and a lip color that matched the dress. When she put on the earrings, her hands were steady. She looked at herself in the full-length mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Not because she looked different, but because she looked like herself without the exhaustion. Like the version of herself that existed when she was not running on fumes. James arrived at 6. The drive to the gala took 30 minutes, and Brielle spent most of it looking out the window, watching the city shift from brick apartments to glass towers. The venue was a renovated art museum, all white walls and high ceilings and soft lighting that made everything glow. People moved through the space in gowns and suits, holding champagne glasses and speaking in the low, confident tones of people who had never worried about paying their electric bill. Ethan was waiting at the entrance. He wore a navy blue suit, darker than his usual, with a silver tie and polished shoes. When he saw Brielle, he stopped mid-sentence in whatever conversation he was having and stared. You look... He paused. You look incredible. Brielle smiled. Thank you. And thank you for the dress. It is beautiful. It is not the dress, he said quietly. Then he offered his arm and she took it. The evening was a blur of introductions, handshakes, and conversations that ranged from healthcare policy to vacation homes and places Brielle had only seen in photographs. She met board members and senators and a famous surgeon whose textbook she had studied in nursing school. And then she met Catherine Calloway. Ethan's mother was exactly what Brielle had imagined. Elegant, silver-haired, dressed in cream and blue, with posture that suggested she had never once slouched in her life. She shook Brielle's hand with a grip that was firm but measured. So you are the nurse, Catherine said. It was not unkind, but it was not warm either. I am, Brielle said. It is a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Calloway. Catherine studied her for a long moment. Ethan has told me a great deal about you. He does not usually talk about people this way. He has been very kind to me. Ethan is kind to many people. That is his nature. I simply want to make sure that kindness is met with the respect it deserves. Brielle held Catherine's gaze without flinching. I can promise you that it is. Something shifted in Catherine's expression. Not quite a smile, but an easing of the guard she had put up. She nodded once. Then enjoy the evening. As they walked away, Ethan leaned close. She likes you. That was liking me? For my mother? That was practically a bear hug. Brielle laughed and several people nearby turned to look. She did not notice. She was too busy feeling, for the first time in a very long time, like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The gala raised over $4 million for pediatric care that night. Brielle learned this the next morning from a text Ethan sent at 6 a.m., along with a photo of the sunrise from his apartment window. 4 million, she texted back. That is a lot of hospital beds. And nurses to staff them, he replied. The important part. They fell into a rhythm after that. Not a formal relationship, not yet, not with any label or declaration attached. But something real and consistent. Tuesday dinners at the Italian restaurant. Sunday morning phone calls that lasted until noon. Walks along the waterfront on evenings when neither of them had anywhere to be. Brielle still wore her blue scrubs 5 days a week. She still held patients' hands and monitored their vitals and charted until her eyes blurred. But now, on the margins of her life, there was someone who asked how her day was and actually listened to the answer. One afternoon she decided it was time. I want you to see where I come from, she told Ethan on the phone. Not the hospital. Not the version of me that shows up in scrubs. The real me. My neighborhood. When? Saturday. I will plan everything. Saturday was bright and cool. Brielle picked Ethan up from his apartment, which she had never seen before. It was in a glass tower downtown, and the lobby alone was the size of her entire building. She did not let it intimidate her. She drove her 10-year-old sedan with the sticky passenger side window and the AUX cord that only worked if you held it at the right angle, and Ethan climbed in without a word about the cracked dashboard or the coffee stain on the center console. Their first stop was the Northside Community Center, a squat brick building where Brielle had spent every Saturday of her childhood. Her father had run the tutoring center there, and after his death, volunteers had kept it going in his name. Ethan walked through the center slowly, looking at the faded photos on the walls, the children's drawings taped to the bulletin board, the hand-painted sign that read Raymond Lawson Learning Room. This was his, Brielle said. He built something that lasted, Ethan said. He touched the edge of the sign gently. That is rare. They visited the church next, a small white building with blue doors where Brielle had been baptized and where her father's funeral had been held. The pastor, a woman named Reverend Grace, hugged Brielle and shook Ethan's hand with the kind of grip that tested character. So you are the young man, Reverend Grace said, eyeing him up and down. Brielle tells me you are one of the good ones. I am trying to be, Ethan said. Trying counts. Keep at it. The last stop was the Northside Family Clinic. It was a cramped, understaffed facility where residents waited hours to see a doctor. The waiting room had plastic chairs bolted to the floor and a television mounted on the wall playing a talk show no one was watching. Every seat was taken. Ethan stood in the doorway and looked at the room for a long time. Brielle watched his face. She saw something change in it. Not shock because he had seen poverty before, had grown up on the edge of it himself. But recognition. The specific recognition of seeing a problem he had the power to address. How many people does this clinic serve? He asked. About 3,000 residents in this area. 1 doctor. 2 nurse practitioners. Open 4 days a week. That is not enough. No, Brielle said. It is not. They drove home in near silence, but it was a productive silence, the kind where ideas are forming beneath the surface. That night Ethan called. I want to build a community health center, he said. A real one. Fully staffed, fully equipped. Right there in Northside. Brielle sat on her bed holding the phone with both hands. Ethan. I want you to help me design it. You know the community. You know what they need. I have the resources but you have the knowledge. She could hear it in his voice, the same urgency she felt every time she watched a patient wait 3 hours for a 10-minute appointment, the same frustration she carried when she drove past that clinic knowing it was not enough. Yes, she said. I will help you. I want to do this. Good. We start Monday. Over the following weeks, their collaboration became the center of both their lives. They met with architects and healthcare consultants. They reviewed community health data and met with residents to understand their needs. Brielle brought her years of frontline nursing experience. Ethan brought resources and the ability to cut through bureaucratic red tape with a single phone call. Tanya saw the change in Brielle and cornered her in the break room one afternoon. You are glowing, Tanya said. Do not try to deny it. I am not glowing. I am project managing. You are in love. I am invested in a community health initiative. Tanya crossed her arms. Say whatever you want. Your face says the rest. That weekend, Brielle introduced Ethan to Amber. They met at a cafe near Amber's campus. Amber arrived in a bright green jacket and yellow scarf, vibrant and sharp-eyed and immediately suspicious of any man in her sister's life. But within 10 minutes, Ethan had won her over. He asked about her biology coursework, mentioned a paper on gene therapy he had read recently, and told her a story about the time he accidentally set off the fire alarm in a college chemistry lab. Amber laughed so hard she nearly knocked over her iced tea. On the drive home, Brielle asked Amber what she thought. "He is real," Amber said. "That is what I think. He is not performing. He is just real." Brielle smiled. "Yeah, he is. Would you trust a billionaire who shows up in your neighborhood and says he wants to build something for your community? Would you believe it was real? Tell us what you think in the comments. And subscribe now, because what happens next will test everything Brielle and Ethan have built together." The blueprints arrived on a Monday. Brielle stood in the conference room of Callaway Health Industries, a glass-walled space on the 42nd floor that overlooked the entire city, and stared at the architectural renderings spread across the table. The building was beautiful. 2 stories, wide windows, warm brick exterior designed to blend with the north side neighborhood. Inside there were exam rooms, a small laboratory, a pharmacy, a counseling suite, and a children's health wing. At the top of the blueprints, in clean block letters, was the name, the Raymond Lawson Community Health Center. Brielle pressed her hand flat against the paper. Her father's name. On a building that would serve the community he had given his life to. "Is that all right?" Ethan asked from across the table. He stood with his hands in his pockets, watching her carefully. Gregory Porter, his assistant, hovered near the door with a tablet, ready to make adjustments. "It is more than all right," Brielle said. Her voice was steady even though her eyes were not. "It is perfect." They spent the next 3 months in a rhythm that felt like breathing. Brielle reduced her shifts at Mercy Ridge to 3 days a week, a change that Dr. Fleming supported wholeheartedly. The other 4 days she worked alongside Ethan and his team on the health center. She attended meetings with city officials who tried to bury the project in permits and regulations. Ethan handled the politics. Brielle handled the practicalities, insisting on specific equipment, specific staffing ratios, specific protocols that she knew from 6 years of nursing would make the difference between a clinic that looked good on paper and one that actually served people. They disagreed sometimes. Ethan wanted a state-of-the-art digital check-in system. Brielle wanted a front desk with a human being who could look a nervous patient in the eye and say, "We are glad you are here." They compromised. Digital check-in with a staff member stationed beside it. These disagreements never turned bitter. They had a way of talking through differences that felt less like arguing and more like 2 people looking at the same problem from different angles and trusting each other enough to say, "I see it differently." One evening, after a particularly long meeting about supply chain logistics, they sat in Ethan's office as the sun went down. The city spread below them, lights beginning to blink on in a scattered pattern. "I have a confession," Ethan said. Brielle looked at him. "Okay. Before I met you, I was considering selling the company." She blinked. "Selling?" "I built Callaway Health Industries because of what happened to my father. But somewhere along the way it became just numbers. Revenue, market share, stock price. I forgot why I started it. I was tired, Brielle. Bone tired in a way that had nothing to do with hours and everything to do with purpose." He turned to face her. "And then you fell asleep in my car." Brielle laughed softly. "I am not sure an exhausted nurse snoring in your backseat qualifies as a life-changing event. It does when she reminds you why you built the whole thing in the first place." He paused. "You brought me back to the reason, Brielle. Every time you talk about a patient, every time you fight for a better spec in that health center, every time you tell me about your father and what he believed, you remind me that this work matters." Brielle did not look away. She held his gaze and felt something settle inside her, a recognition that what was growing between them was not just attraction or gratitude or shared purpose. It was all of those things and something deeper. Something she was not ready to name yet but could no longer pretend was not there. "You are a good man, Ethan," she said. "I hope you know that. I am trying to be." The weeks continued to pass. The construction site broke ground. Brielle stood in the dirt in her green jacket and hard hat, watching the first beams go up, and felt her father's presence so strongly it almost knocked her sideways. Catherine Callaway came to visit the site one afternoon, unannounced. She wore cream slacks and a blue blouse and looked at the construction with the same careful, evaluating expression she had turned on Brielle at the gala. "This is impressive work," Catherine said. "Thank you," Brielle said. "Ethan has been." "I'm not talking about Ethan." Catherine turned to her. "I'm talking about you. The specifications, the community input process, the way you have designed this center to actually serve the people who need it. That is your work." Brielle felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I just know what patients need. That is precisely the point." Catherine paused, then did something Brielle did not expect. She reached out and took Brielle's hand. Her grip was firm and warm. "I was cautious about you at first. I want you to know that. Not because of who you are, but because Ethan has been hurt before and I am his mother. Protecting him is my job. I understand. But I can see now that you are not someone he needs protection from. You are someone who makes him better. Catherine squeezed her hand once and let go. Welcome to the family, Brielle. Brielle stood on the construction site, surrounded by noise and dust and the skeleton of a building that would carry her father's name, and felt more whole than she had felt in years. The article appeared on a Tuesday morning. Brielle was in the break room at Mercy Ridge pouring coffee, when Tanya burst through the door holding her phone like it was on fire. Do not read this, Tanya said. What? I'm serious. Do not look at your phone. Brielle put down the coffee pot. Tanya. What is going on? Tanya handed her the phone. The screen showed a tabloid website with a bold headline, Gold Digger Nurse Targets Billionaire, inside the scheme that fooled Ethan Calloway. Brielle's blood went cold. She scrolled. The article was long, detailed, and vicious. It claimed that Brielle had deliberately entered Ethan's car that night in the parking garage, that she had orchestrated the entire encounter to gain access to his wealth. It cited unnamed sources, who claimed she had been bragging about landing a billionaire. It included photos of her at the gala in the red dress, standing beside Ethan, with captions that twisted every image into evidence of manipulation. The byline credited the story to an anonymous source close to Callaway Health Industries. Brielle's hands trembled. She set the phone down and pressed her palms against the counter. It is not true, she said. Her voice was flat, controlled, the nurse voice she used when everything was falling apart and someone needed to stay calm. None of it is true. Of course it is not true, Tanya said, putting a hand on her shoulder. Anyone who knows you for 5 minutes knows that. But the internet did not know her for 5 minutes. Within hours the story had spread. Comment sections filled with people calling her names she refused to read. Her social media, which she barely used, flooded with messages from strangers who had opinions about a woman they had never met. Ethan called at noon. His voice was tight with a controlled anger she had never heard before. I have seen it, he said. I know who is behind this. Who? Victor Haynes. He has been losing contracts to us all year. His company is in trouble, and he is looking for any way to damage my reputation. Going after you is his way of getting to me. Brielle closed her eyes. Ethan, maybe I should step back. If being with me is going to cause problems for your company? No. The word came fast and firm. Absolutely not. You are not the problem here, Brielle. Yes. And I am going to make that very clear. That afternoon, Ethan held a press conference. Brielle watched it on the television in the Mercy Ridge break room, surrounded by nurses and staff who had gathered to support her. Ethan stood at a podium in front of the Callaway Health Industries logo, wearing his navy blue suit, his expression calm but his eyes sharp. I want to address the article that was published this morning regarding my personal life, he said. The story is false. Every claim in it is fabricated. Brielle Lawson did not scheme to enter my car. She was an exhausted nurse at the end of a 16-hour shift who made an honest mistake. I drove her home. That is the truth. He paused. The room full of reporters was silent. I also want to say something about the woman this article attacked. Brielle Lawson is the most selfless, hardworking, and dedicated person I have ever known. She has spent her career caring for strangers. She has sacrificed her own comfort to put her sister through college. She has helped me design a community health center that will serve thousands of people for years to come. She is not a gold digger. She is the best person in every room she enters. He looked directly into the camera. The source of this article will be identified and held accountable. That is all. The break room erupted. Tanya was on her feet, clapping. Other nurses joined in. Even the charge nurse, who never showed emotion during work hours, wiped her eyes. Brielle sat in her chair, her hand over her mouth, watching the man she was falling in love with stand in front of the entire country and choose her. That night, Ethan came to her apartment. She opened the door and he was standing there, still in his suit, tie loosened, looking tired but resolute. Are you okay? He asked. She pulled him inside and wrapped her arms around him. She held on tight and he held her back, and neither of them said anything for a long time. Thank you, she finally said against his shoulder. For standing up for me. I will always stand up for you, he said. Always. The fallout from the article was swift, but not in the direction Victor Haynes had intended. Within 48 hours of Ethan's press conference, Gregory Porter, Ethan's meticulous assistant, delivered a folder to Brielle's apartment. Inside was a stack of printed emails, financial records, and phone logs that traced the false article directly back to Victor Haynes. The emails showed Victor paying a freelance writer to fabricate the story. The financial records showed payments from Victor's personal account to the tabloid's parent company. The phone logs showed 17 calls between Victor and the unnamed sources quoted in the article, all of whom turned out to be employees of Haynes' own company. Ethan and Brielle reviewed the evidence together at his apartment. It was the first time she had been there. The space was large and modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the river, but it was also surprisingly simple. Minimal furniture. A bookshelf overflowing with paperbacks. A framed photo of his parents on the kitchen counter. "What do we do with this?" Brielle asked, holding one of the emails. "We release it," Ethan said. "All of it. To every major outlet that ran the original story. Will that not make things worse? More attention, more headlines?" Ethan shook his head. "The truth does not make things worse. Silence does." The next morning, Callaway Health Industries' legal team issued a public statement along with the full evidence package. Every major news outlet that had picked up the original story now ran corrections. Investigative journalists dug deeper and found that Victor Haynes had attempted similar smear campaigns against other competitors in the past. Within a week, Victor lost 3 major business partnerships. 2 board members of his company resigned. His stock price dropped 14%. The man who had tried to tear Brielle apart had torn himself apart instead. The community response was overwhelming. Brielle received hundreds of messages from people she had never met, nurses and working mothers and people who had been on the receiving end of similar attacks. They wrote to tell her they believed her. They wrote to tell her they were proud of her. They wrote to tell her she was not alone. Tanya printed out the best ones and taped them to the inside of Brielle's locker at work. "For the hard days," she said. "Read these." But the moment that mattered most to Brielle came from Catherine Callaway. On a Wednesday evening, Brielle's phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. "Brielle, it is Catherine. Mrs. Callaway. Hello. I owe you an apology." Catherine's voice was measured but sincere. "When we first met, I held back. I was cautious. I let my caution prevent me from seeing you clearly, and for that, I am sorry." Brielle leaned against her kitchen counter. "You were protecting your son. I understand that. But I should have trusted his judgment sooner. He has never been wrong about the character of another person. Not once." Catherine paused. "You are family, Brielle. I want you to know that. You are part of this family." Brielle's eyes filled. "Thank you, Catherine. That means everything to me." "Good. Now I am sending you my lemon cake recipe. It is a family secret, and if you share it with anyone, there will be consequences." Brielle laughed, a full, bright laugh that echoed through her small kitchen. "I will guard it with my life." After they hung up, Brielle sat in the quiet of her apartment and let the events of the past week settle into place. The attack. The defense. The truth coming out. The community rallying around her. Catherine opening the door. Every piece of it had tried to break her and Ethan apart, and every piece of it had pulled them closer together. The next time she saw Ethan, they were sitting on a bench at the waterfront near the Italian restaurant. The sun was setting and the water reflected the sky in shades of pink and blue. "I need to tell you something," Ethan said. Brielle looked at him. His face was calm, but his hands were clasped tight in his lap. "I am in love with you," he said. "Not because of what we are building. Not because of what you do. Because of who you are. The way you talk to patients. The way you fight for what is right. The way you took my hand at that dinner table and said thank you like it was the most important word in the language." He turned to face her fully. "I love you, Brielle. And I am not saying that to get anything from you. I am saying it because it is true and you deserve to hear it." Brielle felt the words land in her chest like a warm hand pressing against her heart. She had been waiting for this, she realized. Not waiting for someone to say it, but waiting for someone to mean it. And Ethan meant it. She could see it in his eyes, in the slight tremor of his hands, in the way he had said it without any performance or pressure. "I love you too," she said. "I have been falling in love with you since you told your driver to pull over and let me out, and you were more worried about me standing on a sidewalk at 3 in the morning than about a stranger being in your car." He smiled. It was the widest smile she had ever seen on his face. Then he leaned forward and kissed her, gently, and the river kept moving and the sky kept changing and everything for a moment was exactly as it should be. "There is something else," he said when they pulled apart. "The health center is almost finished. We open in 2 months. And I want you to consider something. Okay? I want you to be the co-director of the Callaway Foundation. Full-time. You would oversee the health center, future programs, community partnerships. It is a leadership role, Brielle. The kind of role you were born for." She looked at the water. She thought about her scrubs, her patients, the rhythm of hospital life that had defined her for 6 years. Then she thought about the health center, about the thousands of people it would serve, about the chance to shape something that would outlast her. "Yes," she said. "I accept." Ethan took her hand, and they sat together as the last light of the day sank into the water. The city hummed around them, but on that bench there was only stillness. The morning of the grand opening was the brightest morning Brielle could remember. The sky was a deep, cloudless blue. The sun was high and strong, and the new brick facade of the Raymond Lawson Community Health Center glowed in the light. The building was everything they had planned. Welcoming, warm, professional, and woven into the neighborhood like it had always been there. Brielle stood in the lobby wearing a green dress and silver flats, her hair in a twist, clipboard in hand. The space smelled like fresh paint and new carpet and possibility. Around her, staff members moved through final preparations, arranging chairs in the atrium, testing the sound system, setting out programs printed on white cardstock with her father's name across the top. Ethan arrived at 9, wearing a blue suit and a tie that matched her dress. He had not planned that. Or maybe he had. She never could tell with him. "How are you feeling?" he asked, standing beside her as she surveyed the room. "Like I am standing in a dream I had a long time ago and forgot about." "It is not a dream," he said. "You built this. We built this." The ceremony was scheduled for noon. Guests began arriving at 11. City officials, hospital administrators, community leaders, and dozens of Northside residents who had waited years for a facility like this. Reverend Grace came early, wearing a bright blue hat that could be spotted from across the room. Catherine Calloway arrived in cream and navy, shook hands with everyone, and told Brielle the atrium lighting was perfectly chosen. Tanya came in her day-off clothes, maroon blouse and gray slacks, and took a front-row seat. "I am here to cry," she announced. "Do not judge me." Jonathan Reed, Ethan's best friend, flew in from Boston. He was tall, easygoing, and shook Brielle's hand with genuine warmth. "I have heard nothing but amazing things about you," he said. "Ethan does not exaggerate, but I think he might have undersold you." By 11:30 the atrium was packed. Brielle checked her phone. Amber had texted an hour ago, "On my way. Traffic is terrible. Save me a seat." Brielle texted back, "Front row next to Tanya. Hurry." At noon the ceremony began. Ethan spoke first, telling the story of why the center existed, what it represented, and who it was named for. He spoke about Raymond Lawson, a man he had never met but had come to know through his daughter. The crowd was silent. Several people wiped their eyes. Then Brielle took the podium. She looked out at the faces before her, some familiar, some strangers, all of them here because they believed in something. "My father used to say that the best thing you can do with what you have is give it away," she said. Her voice was clear and strong. He did not have much. But he gave everything he had, every Saturday morning, to kids in this neighborhood who needed someone to believe in them. This center is not just a building. It is a continuation of what he started. It is a promise that this community will be seen, will be served, and will be cared for. She paused. "And I want to thank the man who made this possible. Not because he wrote the checks, though he did, but because he listened. He came to this neighborhood and he listened. That is where it all started." She looked at Ethan and he looked back at her and the room fell away. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. It was a number she did not recognize. She ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. She stepped away from the podium and answered. "Hello. Is this Brielle Lawson?" "Yes. This is Mercy Ridge Hospital. Your sister Amber Lawson has been brought in by ambulance. She was involved in a car accident on Route 9. The room went silent, though she knew it had not. The sound just disappeared. Everything narrowed to a single point, a single word. "Amber." She turned. Ethan was already moving toward her. He had seen her face change. He had read it instantly. "Amber," Brielle said. "Car accident. Mercy Ridge." They were in the car in under 2 minutes. James drove fast, weaving through traffic, and Brielle sat in the back seat gripping Ethan's hand so hard her knuckles ached. She did not speak. She could not. Every thought in her head was a prayer she did not have words for. The drive took 14 minutes. It felt like 14 hours. At Mercy Ridge, Brielle ran through the emergency department doors, past colleagues who called her name, past the triage desk, past the curtained bays, until she found Amber in Bay 7. Her sister was sitting up. Sitting up. Her left wrist was in a splint. There was a bandage on her forehead and bruises on her right arm. And 4 dripped saline into her hand. But she was sitting up and she was breathing and she was alive. "Bree," Amber said, and her voice cracked. Brielle crossed the bay in 2 steps and wrapped her arms around her sister as gently as she could manage, which was not very gentle, because she was shaking too hard to be careful. "You are okay," Brielle whispered. "Tell me you are okay." "Fractured wrist. Some bruises." The airbag did its job. Amber's good hand gripped the back of Brielle's dress. "I'm okay. I promise." Ethan stood at the curtain, giving them space. When Brielle finally looked up, her face wet, her makeup ruined, her composure completely gone, he was right there. Steady. Present. Waiting. "She is okay," Brielle said. "I know," he said. "I can see." The doctor came in, confirmed Amber's injuries were minor, and said she would be discharged in a few hours. Tanya arrived shortly after, having left the gala the moment she heard. Catherine called. Jonathan sent flowers. The entire network of people Brielle and Ethan had built around themselves mobilized in an instant, because that is what real support looks like. People who show up without being asked. Later that evening, after Amber was discharged and settled safely in Brielle's apartment with a splint, a bag of medication, and strict instructions to rest, Brielle stepped out onto the fire escape. The night air was cool. The city was quiet. Ethan followed her out. "Today was supposed to be a celebration," Brielle said. "It still is. Amber is safe. The center is open. And you are standing right here." She turned to him. Her eyes were red. Her dress was wrinkled. She had never looked more beautiful to him. "I was so scared," she said. "I cannot lose her, Ethan. She is everything." He pulled her close. She pressed her face against his chest and let the last of the fear drain out of her in slow, shaking breaths. "You are not going to lose her," he said into her hair. "And you are not going to lose me. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." She believed him. Not because he was rich or powerful or capable of solving problems that seemed impossible, but because in every moment that had mattered, from the night in the car to the press conference to this fire escape, he had done the same thing. He had stayed. 3 months passed and the world kept turning. The Raymond Lawson Community Health Center served over 2,000 patients in its first 90 days. The wait times were less than 30 minutes. The staff included 4 physicians, 8 nurses, 2 counselors, a pharmacist, and a full-time social worker. Brielle oversaw it all as co-director of the Callaway Foundation, working alongside Ethan with the same passion she had brought to every patient bedside. Amber's wrist healed completely. She returned to classes, finished her final semester, and submitted her medical school applications with recommendation letters from 2 of the center's physicians, who had been so impressed by her volunteer work during her recovery that they had insisted on writing for her. Tanya was promoted to charge nurse at Mercy Ridge. She celebrated by buying herself a pair of maroon boots and wearing them with everything. Catherine Callaway called Brielle every Sunday. They talked about the foundation, about Amber, about recipes, and about nothing at all. Catherine had become, in the quietest way, a second mother. Victor Haynes' company filed for restructuring. He was removed from the board. Brielle did not celebrate his downfall. She simply moved forward. And through all of it, there was Ethan. He was there on the mornings when Brielle woke up at 5 to review patient outcome reports. He was there on the evenings when she came home exhausted and needed nothing more than someone to hand her a cup of tea and sit beside her in silence. He was there on the hard days when a patient at the center received a difficult diagnosis and Brielle carried the weight of it home, and he was there on the good days when a child got a clean bill of health and Brielle came through the door smiling so wide her cheeks hurt. He was always there. The morning of Amber's graduation ceremony was warm and golden. Not the kind of golden that comes from filters or artificial light, but the real kind, the kind that happens when the sun is high and the air is clean and the day itself seems to understand that something important is happening. Brielle dressed carefully. She wore a blue dress with silver earrings and the same shoes she had worn to the gala, because they had carried her through a night that changed her life and she figured they could carry her through another one. Ethan picked her up at 8. He wore a light gray suit with a blue tie, and when she got in the car, he handed her a small box. "What is this?" she asked. "Open it." Inside was a silver bracelet with a single charm shaped like a heart. Engraved on the back were 2 words, "Always here." Brielle put it on immediately. "It is beautiful. Thank you." "There is more," he said. "But that part comes later." She looked at him, curious, but he just smiled and told James to drive. The ceremony was held on the main lawn of Langford University, under a white tent with rows of chairs stretching back farther than Brielle could count. She sat in the family section with Ethan, Catherine, Tanya, and Reverend Grace, who had brought her blue hat and a handkerchief she fully intended to use. When Amber's name was called, Brielle stood. She stood and watched her baby sister walk across that stage in her cap and gown, diploma in hand, fractured wrist fully healed, smiling the same smile their father used to wear when he watched his students succeed. Brielle cried. She did not try to hide it. Tanya cried beside her. Catherine dabbed her eyes. Even Ethan's jaw tightened in a way that told Brielle he was holding back something of his own. After the ceremony, Amber ran to Brielle and threw her arms around her. "We did it," Amber said. "You did it." "No." Amber pulled back and held her sister's face in both hands. "We did it. Every shift you worked. Every sacrifice you made. This degree has your name on it just as much as mine." Brielle held her sister and felt the full circle of it, the bills, the shifts, the exhaustion, the night she fell asleep in a stranger's car, everything that had brought them to this moment, standing on a green lawn under a clear sky with a diploma in hand and a future wide open. That evening they gathered for dinner at the Italian restaurant, the one with the checkered tablecloths and the candles and wine bottles. Ethan had reserved the private dining room. The table was set for 12. Brielle, Ethan, Amber, Catherine, Tanya, Reverend Grace, Gregory, Jonathan, Dr. Fleming, and 2 of Amber's closest friends. The food was incredible. The laughter was louder. Stories were told and retold. Amber described her most disastrous chemistry experiment. Tanya impersonated Brielle during a code blue and had the entire table crying with laughter. Catherine told a story about Ethan as a 5-year-old trying to run his father's business from the kitchen table with a toy calculator. After dessert, the table quieted. Something shifted in the room. Brielle noticed it first, the way people glanced at Ethan, the way Amber suddenly looked like she was trying very hard not to smile, the way Catherine's hands clasped together in her lap. Ethan stood. He adjusted his tie. He looked at Brielle, and for the first time since she had known him, he looked nervous. "Brielle," he said. The room was silent. "I have spent my life building things. Companies, systems, structures. I have always been good at building. But until I met you, I had never built anything that had a heart." He reached into his jacket pocket and took out a small velvet box. Brielle's breath caught. "You taught me that the most important thing you can build is not a company or a center or a foundation. It is a life with someone who makes every room brighter, every problem smaller, and every day worth showing up for." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, a simple band with a single diamond that caught the candlelight, and it was elegant and understated and perfect. "This was my grandmother's," he said. "She wore it for 52 years. My mother gave it to me and told me to find someone worthy of it." He glanced at Catherine, who nodded with tears in her eyes. "I found her." He looked back at Brielle. "Will you marry me?" The table held its breath. Brielle looked at the ring. She looked at the man holding it. She thought about the night in the car, the coffee in the cafeteria, the dinner at this very restaurant where he told her that her father's bills were paid. She thought about the red dress and the gala and the community center and the press conference where he stood in front of cameras and chose her. She thought about the fire escape where he held her while she shook, and the bench by the water where he told her he loved her. She thought about all of it, every moment, every kindness, every choice, and she said the only word that made sense. "Yes." The room erupted. Amber jumped out of her chair. Tanya screamed. Catherine pressed both hands to her heart. Reverend Grace raised her hands toward the ceiling and said something that sounded like a prayer and a celebration all at once. Gregory clapped politely. Jonathan whistled. Dr. Fleming beamed. Ethan slid the ring onto Brielle's finger, and it fit perfectly, of course it did, and he kissed her while the people they loved cheered around them. Later, when the restaurant had emptied and the candles had burned low, Brielle and Ethan walked along the waterfront. The city reflected in the water like a second city made of light. "So," Brielle said, "we are getting married. We are getting married. You know, this all started because I was too tired to read a license plate. Best mistake of my life." She leaned into him, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders, and they walked in the quiet of the night, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely way and chosen, over and over again, to stay. 6 months later, on a Saturday morning in October, they married in an outdoor ceremony on the grounds of the Raymond Lawson Community Health Center. Brielle wore a white gown with a red sash. Amber was her maid of honor. Tanya stood beside her in maroon. Catherine sat in the front row and cried before the ceremony even started. Reverend Grace officiated. She told the crowd of 200 that love is not a grand gesture. Love is a man who drives a tired woman home. Love is a woman who builds a health center for people she has never met. Love is two people who face every storm together and come out the other side still holding hands. Brielle and Ethan exchanged vows they had written themselves. His were precise and earnest. Hers were warm and honest. They both promised the same thing in different words, which was simply this: I choose you. Today, tomorrow, and every day that comes after. At the reception, Amber gave a toast. My sister once told me that our father believed the best thing you can do with what you have is give it away, Amber said, holding her glass. Brielle has lived that every single day. She gave me her time, her energy, her sleep, her paychecks, and her whole heart so that I could stand here today debt-free, with an acceptance letter to medical school in my pocket. The crowd gasped. Brielle looked at Amber, stunned. I got in, Amber said, grinning. I found out this morning. Surprise. Brielle covered her face with both hands. Ethan pulled her close. The crowd stood and applauded, and the sound washed over them like warm rain. As the reception continued and the evening deepened and the music played and people danced, Brielle stood at the edge of the celebration and looked at the building behind her. Her father's name was carved into the stone above the entrance. Inside, patients were being cared for. Outside, her family, old and new, filled the lawn with laughter. She had started that night as an exhausted nurse who got into the wrong car. She had ended up here. Loved, supported, purposeful, and home. Kindness had led her here. Hope had carried her. Love had stayed. And it always would.